We began talking about learning and conditioning, and many of you missed the day on classical conditioning. So this is a quick flip video for you to get caught up to speed about classical conditioning. So classical conditioning starts with the work of Ivan Pavlov, who is a Russian physiologist. And he's a Nobel Prize winning physiologist. He's studying digestion in dogs. He's really interested in how their digestion systems work, and he notices some things in his experiments which cause him to start taking a look at the study of learning rather than the study of digestion.
Pollinators have come up with not only of animal behavior, but of human nature as well. And these views all concern a process that we take for granted, learning, because we are all truly born to learn. Ironically, one of the most important figures in the study of learning, Ivan Pavlov, wasn't concerned with the subject at all, at least not at first. Pavlov, a noted Russian scientist, won the Nobel Prize in Physiology and Medicine in 1904. As this original footage shows, Pavlov was initially interested in digestion and the action of the salivary gland. By diverting the saliva of dogs into test tubes, he could precisely measure if and how much they salivated during digestion. When food was presented, the dog salivated quickly. Inherited salivary reflex. But over repeated testing, a strange thing happened. The dog salivated before contact with food. Just the sight of the food was enough to stimulate their drooling. Then, just seeing the food dish, or even hearing the footsteps of Pavlov or his assistants, was enough to trigger this built-in reflex. What was going on to elicit this response? Pavlov decided to find out by systematically varying the stimuli and measuring the dog's reaction. Metronomes, lights, and bells were all used as stimuli, and they all worked as stand-ins for the food. What mattered was not the kind of stimulus that was used, but the fact that it reliably signaled that food was on the way. Pavlov had discovered a fundamental type of learning called classical conditioning. An original stimulus elicits an automatic, unlearned response. Both stimulus and response happen naturally. They are unconditional. Then a second, neutral stimulus that never elicits an unconditioned response by itself is introduced just before the presentation of the original stimulus. If the neutral or signaling stimulus is presented alone, and a response occurs as if the original stimulus was still there, we say that conditioning has taken place. The arbitrary neutral stimulus becomes a conditioned stimulus. The reverse is also true. Pavlov and others studied the extinction over time of such conditioned responses. When the subject learns that the conditioned stimulus no longer signals a desired event, the acquisition process is reversed, as the learned connection is gradually weakened. Pavlov's work, and the work of those who followed him, led to a remarkable conclusion, and that is any stimulus an organism can perceive is capable of eliciting any reaction the organism is capable of making. This means that virtually any sound, sight, or smell can influence the way our muscles tense or relax, our moods fluctuate, or even the way our attitudes are formed. For instance, if I say, relax, and then do this, you're going to be startled and upset. After 5 or 6 pairings of relax, just saying the word relax is going to generate a negative response rather than its usual learned reaction.
So let's take a look at how we define the unconditioned stimulus, the unconditioned response, the conditioned stimulus, and the conditioned response, as well as the neutral stimulus, and what conditioned and unconditioned means. So the unconditioned stimulus is always going to be something unlearned. In Pavlov's original experiment, this is the meat powder that is presented to the dogs. So some other examples of unconditioned stimuli that you might experience could be something like the novel coronavirus. So that is a virus that will cause some people to get sick. Wool is a fiber that can cause some people to itch. The meat powder was Pavlov's original unconditioned stimulus. That's unlearned. It's biological. It happens without your conscious awareness or you thinking about it or without, right? That just happens. The unconditioned response, as we just talked about. So the unconditioned response to the novel coronavirus is to get COVID-19. The response to wool could be itching. The response to meat powder could be salivating. So these are things that are unlearned. They're biologically important. They will happen, right, without you pairing anything with them. They're just naturally occurring in our environments. The conditioned stimulus, so conditioned is always going to mean learned. Unconditioned is unlearned or biologically occurring. Conditioned is learned. You have learned to pair these things together. So the conditioned stimulus is going to be, in the example of Pavlov's example, the bell. This was previously neutral. I wouldn't ring a bell and my dog wouldn't come running and start salivating thinking it's going to get a treat because that's not part of our routine. The bell in this case was added and the bell was used. It was a unique stimulus that was paired with the food. The conditioned response in Pavlov's experiment was to salivate to the sound of the bell. So what Pavlov did is he rang the bell. It wasn't actually a bell. It was, well, he actually used a lot of different things. He used a buzzer. He used a metronome. He used a tuning fork for like a piano. So he used a bunch of different noises. So we can just say bell to make it easier. So he rang the bell. He presented food powder. He rang the bell. He presented food powder. He rang the bell. He presented food powder. He rang the bell, he presented food powder. After a while, ringing the bell and not presenting the food powder still elicited the dogs to salivate, and that's because they had become classically conditioned. They had started to associate the idea of the bell with food. Okay, so let's take a look at some other examples of classical conditioning or examples of people learning via these associations. All right, Eden Ramponi, so this is my dog. Eden Ramponi was taken to the vet when she was first adopted. Though she had never visited a vet, she learned very quickly she didn't like them. She received a painful shock from the vet, and Eden now dislikes car rides and the vet. So the unconditioned stimulus here is going to be the shot. Shots are painful. You don't have to learn that sticking a sharp, long needle into your skin is painful. It just is. So Eden gets a shot. The unconditioned stimulus is the shot. The unconditioned response is pain. The conditioned stimulus is the car ride. The conditioned stimulus could also be the vet. The conditioned response is to dislike car rides or dislike the vet. Another example, George's mom ran a very hot bath and popped George into the bath without testing it. Despite it being many months later, George still screams "Awa" when being placed into even a warm bath. So the unconditioned stimulus here would be very hot water. The unconditioned response would be burn or pain. The conditioned stimulus would be the bathtub, bath toys, the bathroom, a towel. The conditioned response could be to yell "awa" whenever being put near a bath. Allie walks to school every day. Each time a yellow school bus drives by, it drives through a huge puddle and splashes her. Whenever she sees a yellow school bus, she jumps back because she's afraid of being splashed. So here, the unconditioned stimulus would be cold water to your face or cold water to your body. The unconditioned response would be to shiver or to jump back. You'd be startled if you got sprayed. The conditioned stimulus is the yellow school bus. She's learning to pair getting splashed with a yellow school bus. And the conditioned response would be to jump back when you see a yellow school bus. A man goes to his favorite restaurant and gets his all-time favorite dish, shrimp. After eating at the restaurant, he gets food poisoning and becomes violently ill. After food poisoning, he never wants to eat shrimp ever again. The unconditioned stimulus here, or unlearned stimulus, is going to be food poisoning. The unconditioned response is going to be nausea. The conditioned stimulus is going to be the shrimp or the restaurant. And the conditioned response is going to be to not eat shrimp anymore, or to maybe even never go to that restaurant ever again. This is a special kind of classical conditioning called taste aversion, which we'll talk about more in a little bit. Gus cries whenever he sees me with a medicine dropper, even just pulling it out of the dishwasher. Adorable baby Gus hates taking his medicine when he's sick or coughing. I administer the awful tasting goo from a medicine dropper. So the unconditioned stimulus would be the bad tasting medicine. The unconditioned response would be Gus hates the bad tasting medicine. Conditioned stimulus would be the medicine dropper, and the conditioned response is to see the medicine dropper and cry whenever he sees it. So advertising executives know all about classical conditioning, and the reason why celebrities are used for products are because we associate them because of classical conditioning. So Adam Levine, or any celebrity you like, or any attractive supermodel really promoting a product follows this classical conditioning example. So Adam Levine promotes a product for acne. You have a favorable opinion of Adam Levine, and thus are likely to buy this product the next time you have an acne, a big breakout or a big zit. So the unconditioned stimulus would be Adam Levine. The unconditioned response would be you're attracted to him, he's a hunk, he's a babe. Conditioned stimulus would be proactive, and the conditioned response would be to think proactive is a product you want to use because you associate it with Adam Levine and he's a babe. So just to clarify a couple of things here, first of all, classical conditioning, the process is the tone is placed just before the meat powder. So the conditioned stimulus is placed just before the unconditioned stimulus. So tone, unconditioned stimulus. Tone, meat powder, tone, meat powder, tone, meat powder, tone, meat powder, tone, meat powder. And Pavlov did this time and time and time and time again until classical conditioning, until the learning occurred. It was not just one time. Most of the time, classical conditioning does not happen after just one time. So in classical conditioning, the conditioned stimulus must come before the unconditioned stimulus, or the tone must come just before the meat powder. If the tone comes after the meat powder, the dog is not going to learn to associate those things together. The conditioned stimulus and the unconditioned stimulus, so the tone and the meat powder, must occur together really, really, really close together, like 5 seconds apart, or maybe a little bit more, but no more than that. Otherwise, the animal or the human being doesn't learn to put those things together. The neutral stimulus, or the tone or the buzzer, must be paired with the unconditioned stimulus several times, as I mentioned just a couple minutes ago. It has to occur over and over and over and over and over again. Okay, and finally, the conditioned stimulus, the tone or the buzzer, has to be a distinctive or a unique sound that stands out from the background. Otherwise, an animal isn't going to learn to associate that with the food. So, right, if a barking dog was paired with meat powder in Pavlov's lab, because there were so many dogs in Pavlov's lab, they probably wouldn't have learned to salivate at the sound of a barking dog. For you, if you think about the idea of the lunch bell ringing, that lunch bell that rings at 10:50 or whatever your lunchtime happens to be is unique. It's distinctly different. It stands out from the background noise that we hear every day at Kimberly High School, right? Your phone ringer rings, it's a distinctive, unique noise, and that alerts you to a message, or that alerts you to your phone ringing. And it has to be distinctive. You're not going to become classically conditioned to the hum of your computer, or the sound of a projector, or like paper shuffling, because it's not unique, it's not distinctive.